All right, everyone. Today is extra special, maybe even emergency podcast worthy, Robby, just maybe, because it's not every day that you are joined by director extraordinaire, the director of Loki, Kate Herron. Kate, welcome to Friends from Work.
Woo! Hi, thank you so much.
Thanks for being here.
Kate, it's so fun to have you. We got the chance to speak with Michael Waldron back at sort of the beginning of the Loki journey here, right? I think between the first and second episode. So it's so fun to be able to talk to you now here, sort of as we're reaching the big conclusion. We were wondering, and we sort of talked to Michael about this as well, in that press conference for Loki, you know, you mentioned how hard you fought for this project and how as soon as it was announced, you were really excited to be a part of it. We were wondering, you know, what is it about the character of Loki or maybe the MCU or Marvel Studios in general that really drew you to this project?
I would say that, you know, I love Marvel, and like everyone, like it's been really cool watching, you know, Kevin Feige like build up the universe with all the different films, and I was just following that as a fan and intrigued to see what they were doing. I'd say like my sort of gateway into Marvel was the X-Men cartoon when I was a kid. Like I just loved that. I remember like trying to turn my Barbies into Storm, and like it went very badly. I put bleach on her hair, and I remember she was bald by the end, and and I was just like, this is a bad idea. But I think for me, like I just really enjoyed watching the films. And then Loki is a character that I've just sort of, like so many people, I've just loved, right? Like I think he's had one of the best arcs over the last 10 years, and it's been amazing watching him with the time. Obviously over a decade, you can take the time and take someone from, you know, a villain to an anti-hero in such a satisfying way, which I think they did. Right. And I found out they were making a show about Loki, and I was just like, man, I just want to be part of that. And also I need to know where he's gone. So I was like, I want to pitch. And like, if they don't want me, that's fine, but I just need to find out where he is. So I think for me, that was really key. And just being intrigued, because I think Tom's performance as well as Loki, you know, it's grounded him in such empathy and wit. And I think that was really interesting to me as well. It's like, you know, because it isn't the character that we've seen over the last 10 years, like this is a very different character now, so and on a different journey. So I thought just from like a psychological perspective, that was really interesting as well, like getting to dig into that and seeing, will the character be someone familiar to us, or will they be a little bit different? So so I think that was kind of fun.
Fans seem to be really resonating with last week's episode with classic Loki and Richard Grant's performance. I guess my question is, how were you guys able to pack that much of an emotional impact into such a small amount of screen time? Can you speak to that a little bit?
I think honestly, like the first thing I would say is Richard, because he's a wonderful actor. He has such a commanding presence, and I think he's so good, right? Like Tom, like he brings just such empathy to the character, you know, like when he tells that story in the palace and he says, you know, I miss my brother. And I think that's like something where we're like, no, like it's heartbreaking. And I think for me, like it kind of falls into the whole identity thing across the show, right? Because our Loki, you know, he is very broken in the first episode. And I love that there's that story of like, you know, when Sylvie says to Loki, like, we can do this because we're the same, and they're surprised by how powerful he is. And I think that's where you really get an idea of, because he is really powerful in the comics. And I think that was really cool, a chance to really show Loki's power on such a big scale through classic. And just also, I love the fact, like when we were talking about like, you know, classic Loki, it was like, you know, across the whole team, we're like, well, he has to wear the original outfit. Because I think that was cool to me, because, you know, Marvel have a very almost like an in-house kind of look with the costumes, which is like so specifically them. And I think that was the really fun thing with The Void, was like, well, these are characters and places and things that shouldn't exist. So how do we show that? And with, you know, classic, it was like, well, let's make him look like, you know, classic, like how Marvel might have made a movie about Loki, like, I don't know, 40 years ago.
Right.
So I think that was really fun as well, like getting to show that. But honestly, I'd say the main empathetic thing was, you know, we worked very hard on the story to do that. It's just Richard, he's just so good. Like, I mean, With Mel and I is like one of my favorite films, and he's just a marvelous actor. So
you actually transitioned me perfectly into my next question, which is just, how much fun has it been to drop all those Easter eggs? I mean, you guys at this point I mean, I know every show is doing that, but at this point, you guys have gone full in with the Thanos copter and the little
episode
Thor
5 especially.
Yeah. Was that just so much fun to dive through that comic material and bring that to life?
Completely. Like, I mean, all of us had so much fun with 5 because, you know, I was working with Dan DeLue, who's like VFX supervisor, Marvel heavyweight. Like he did, you know, Infinity War and Endgame. And like, and he was pitching loads of amazing stuff. And I was like, yes, that's so cool. And like Kevin Wright, our executive producer, like he mentioned like the Thanos copter. And I was like, oh my God, we have to put that in because that's so funny. Like they would have deleted that. Of course they would have. Yeah. And then Throg, I think we were trying to get that in wherever we could. And I knew I had this shot like where I wanted to, I suppose you see it more in animation, but I love that, you know, that trope of like going from, you know, the top of the secret lair and through the dirt. I think it's from Futurama is probably where I've seen it the most. But like, but I just was like, oh, I want to do that. But it just felt like an opportunity. Like we have to put something cool there. And then, and then we got to put him there. So that was really fun for me. And we recorded Chris for that as well. Like for that yell, he doesn't.
I was wondering like that. It sounded like Chris.
That's amazing.
Specifically for that moment. So it was just very cool of him to do that. But but it was just really fun, I think, in the void. And and just again kind of thinking, okay, so what could we put here that's deleted and who are these characters? We definitely had a lot of fun. And then across the show, obviously within the TVA, like hiding stuff. And it's just been a lot of fun seeing fans kind of pick out things and respond to them.
Yeah, it's funny because obviously there have been a lot of really fun comics Easter eggs for folks to really dig into. But I've also loved how much you have sort of recreated certain iconic MCU shots, like with the first episode in Iron Man, and then the end of episode 4 with the Avengers. Was that's such a fun idea that we haven't really seen in the other Disney Plus shows? Where did that kind of come from?
I'm trying to think now. Like, honestly, I think because I just love homaging stuff. Because like we definitely like in episode 2, we had like a little nod to 7 because you know I pulled a lot in my DP stylistically from that. So we had that bit with the bookcases and the needle drop there, as in the song. Sorry. So I think honestly, it just felt appropriate because I think the Iron Man one was really interesting to me because I suppose my mind went there because it's a completely different desert, obviously, in Iron Man. But I just was like, this feels like a cool way to just give a little nod for that. Because I know I get a kick out of it if I was a fan and watching. And
absolutely.
And then our Avengers lineup, again, it just felt like the perfect place to do that because everyone knows that music. And you know, and I think it was so fun to me because he wasn't actually there all that long ago. People did like the full timeline of our show. So I think that to me was quite fun. And, you know, Tom could do the same movement. And I just kind of cracked me up. And I love what Natalie did with the music because we thought, it's fun to have the Avengers and then go into this Loki thing, which was a bit more wild and weird. So it just, I don't know. I think for me, I guess because I just love Marvel, so it just felt like fun to get little nods in where we could like that. But
one of our favorite things about Owen Wilson, I mean, he definitely falls into this category of just likable actors, you know, that it's hard to dislike. So what's been fun about that casting for me is that he, even when he's being rude to Loki, who's your favorite character, you still kind of pull for him. You still kind of like him. Can you just speak to what Owen Wilson has brought to the character of Mobius?
Yeah, I mean, it was so much fun talking to him because I remember that we were all like, he'd be amazing. And I remember they were like, okay, Kate, well, you call him and persuade him and see if he wants to do it. And I was like, okay. So like a lot
no
of
pressure.
But I remember calling him and he was just really like what everyone would expect, right? Super smart, super funny. But I remember talking to him about it and like he'd seen some of the films, but I remember that I spoke to him basically about Loki's arc across the MCU, what Loki meant in terms of just MCU, like where it was in its own a bigger timeline. I mean, we were on the phone, I think, for like 4 hours or something, talking about all this stuff, and then just talking through Mobius and how does he fit into the story and what's his tale. So I think that was really key. But the thing that excited me most about Owen was that he said, I want to do something really outside of myself. And I was like, that's really interesting, just because, you know, he's an actor that we've seen do so many different roles, right? Like he's done like massive comedies, but also like, I mean, the films that I love Wes Anderson and, you know, those films that he wrote as well. And I just thought, okay, that's really cool just to see him kind of do something that feels a little bit outside of himself. And I think people can already see that, right? Like even just how he physically looks in the show is so different. And it was really weird. Sometimes he'd come to set and he wouldn't have his wig on and he'd have like, you know, his more traditional blonde hair. And I'd be like, oh no, you look so different. This is so weird. So like, yeah, but I think honestly, he just brings this warmth and playfulness because on set, you know, like so many of Mobius's lines, like he improvised those, like that bit in episode 2, for example, you know, the grapes nuts with Tom and Owen.
Let's go.
Yeah, which is so funny. And like, and I think I'm trying to remember, like there's loads, I don't want to get it wrong because the writers did an amazing job, but he definitely threw in little Owenisms across you know, across it because he's just that kind of actor. You know, he's very playful and he'll always do what's written, but then he'll kind of just, you know, give a little bit extra as well, which is always quite fun.
You talk about him doing something outside of himself. I really liked that in episode 4 when he kind of got aggressive, just because we're not used to seeing like aggressive Owen, and that was really fun for me. So he's doing it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing as well. And it's like, oh, this guy, like in episode 1, when he's like, oh, I can play the heavy keys too. You know, it's like, oh man, like, I think that's the cool thing about him as well, is that, you know, when you see Loki going into the time theater with him in episode 1, Loki's like, well, I'm just going to kill this guy because obviously he tries to. And then it's like, no, actually, I'm actually quite powerful. And I think that's the fun thing with him, is that he's definitely a force to be reckoned with. And I think the fun thing with him and like Tom was finding that kind of warmth and that friendship and the complications within that. Because like you said in episode 4, he is like, oh my God, he's quite tough. And like when he throws him in the loop and but I think that also feels very relatable, that if you have a fallout with a friend, you know, like I think it's like everyone's like, no, please make up. And obviously they do in episode 5, but I think that was like really, and sorry, in the end of episode 4, but I think that was really fun as well, just working with Tom and Owen in a lot of rehearsal and working out, okay, what's the dynamic between these two characters?
It's funny that you say that Owen wanted to do something kind of beyond what he's normally done, because in that conversation with Natalie, she also said that was kind of the note she got when she first sent in the theme, you know, like push further. And it really seems like, you know, from our perspective, just as fans of the show, that everyone kind of bought into just pushing the boundaries with this one.
Yeah, I think I'd always feel like, for example, in 5, like those weird little, like they're called Navas, because like my production designer Kazra pitched those and we named them after his daughter who was born while we were filming. And I remember me and Kazra were like, there's no way they're gonna let us keep these crazy creatures because like they're so crazy. And like Marvel were like, no, they're great. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. But I think that was always the surprise, was that I think always it was like, this might be too weird now. And the no, we'd always get back as no go weirder. So no, I think for me that was just really exciting. And you know, like when I pitched on it, I knew I was pitching quite a different, like even just look and style to, you know, what had come before. And Kevin Feige was like, no, I really love it. I think that's really cool. So I think already with like the blessing of him being so into like already like my interpretation of it, and just I think everyone really, like, you know, he was always pushing the writers like go stranger, go weirder. And I think it kind of just allowed everyone to kind of, okay, well, there's no sky, right? So we'll just see how far we can go with it, and then he'll let us know and he can rein us in if we've gone too far.
Still have that creative freedom, I guess.
Is one thing I'm always curious about, though, even aside from a potential second season, is you are slotting something in to a larger narrative when you're creating something for the MCU. So I have to imagine it's a very different experience than other projects that are maybe within their own kind of isolated universe. I know when we were talking to Michael, you know, he said that they had in the writer's room all of the kind of Marvel comics involving the multiverse. Did you feel like you guys also kind of had to do that with the Marvel films, in terms of just making sure that you were not only not contradicting anything that's come before in the continuity, but also working with the folks that have things coming down the line, like the Doctor Strange team and all those projects? Like, what does that process look like? Because it seems like a lot of moving pieces.
So I would say, like, basically every Marvel production, so they have like a executive producer on the production. So ours was Kevin Wright, who was across story. I mean, he basically, I think he's been on it the longest out of everyone, you know, because he started in the writers' room with Michael and the writers. And then when Michael left to go do Doctor Strange, like Kevin, Wright was on it, and he was with me right until, me and him were working, I think, when episode 1 aired. So like he, I would say, was the real key person in just beyond like actually, producing and working on the story. Because the thing is, obviously Marvel are very secretive. So I don't know everything that's going on in every project, but he knows everything. So he basically would manage that. He would let us know like if anything was, tipping into something another project was, or, steering it in that sense. And like, that's very key. So yeah, we worked very closely together, and he was a creative force and really just sort of, it's so interesting. I think that's a sign of a good producer, right? Is like they create a space in which you feel like the sky's the limit and you have all this creative potential, but you don't feel like you're being restrained in any way. But I think that was really key. But that's definitely how Marvel do it. They're very across everything as a company. And yeah, but no, I never felt like they were like, oh no, you can't do this. Because it was even in like Ep 5, like we had so much fun like discussing like, which Lokis should they meet? Because that was definitely in discussion for a long time. Like President wasn't in there till very late in the game. And I think that was always fun because there are so many, I love the different comic book runs of Loki, but as you guys know, I'm sure like there's so much to pull from. He's had so many different versions. And I think that for us was like, okay, well, working out who should we have in there? And, like Classic and Kid felt perfect beyond just being Kid Loki's like one of the coolest characters, but just Ghost to Christmas Past, Ghost to Christmas Future, and just how those characters play into where our Loki is psychologically, like can I change, can I not? And I think that was always really fun for us, honestly. I think the thing with Marvel is it generally feels like everything's on the table, and then they'll let you know if there's anything that you can't use. But generally I never felt like like whispered in my ear, like kind of, oh no, you can't do that. So yeah, I felt like I had a lot of creative freedom. But yeah, that's so cool. Well, Kate, we are huge fans. Thank you so much for your time. We cannot wait to see what happens in the finale, and then maybe we'll have to circle around back with you, later once you can talk about it. And that'd be fun. But thank you so much. This has been a blast for us. No, thank you. Cheers. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Kate.